By the end of this video, you will know exactly why the quietest person in the room is usually the most dangerous one, and how to become that person without changing your personality, your job, or your voice. Picture this. A man sits in a meeting where everyone is talking over each other, defending their ideas, chasing approval with their eyes. He says almost nothing. And somehow, by the end of the meeting, his opinion is the only one anyone remembers. That's not an accident, that's a skill. And later I'll show you why most people who try to be quiet and powerful get it completely backwards and end up more invisible than before. If any part of this hits close to home, type silent in the comments right now before you forget. You already know the feeling. You wake up and your phone is already waiting for you, a little glowing rectangle demanding your attention before your feet even touch the floor. You scroll for 11 minutes you didn't plan to spend, and somehow you feel behind before the day has started. You get to work, or you open your laptop at the kitchen table, and someone says something in a meeting that's slightly wrong, slightly unfair, slightly aimed at you, and you feel the words rising in your throat, the need to correct them, to explain yourself, to make sure everyone understands your side. You do it, you always do it, and an hour later you're still replaying the conversation, still defending yourself in your head to someone who has already moved on with their day. At dinner, a family member brings up the same old argument, the same tired script, and you take the bait again, because not taking it feels like losing. You know the exact shape of the conversation before it even starts. You could write both sides of the script from memory, and yet you play your part anyway, because some old stubborn part of you still believes that if you just explain your position one more time, with slightly better words this time, they'll finally understand and the argument will finally, permanently end. It never does. Maybe it's not even a big fight. Maybe it's smaller than that, a passive comment from a friend about how you spend your weekends, a slightly judgmental look from a stranger in the grocery line because your kid is having a meltdown, a coworker who takes credit for something you built, and you spend the rest of the afternoon rehearsing the sentence you should have said. None of these moments are dramatic on their own. That's exactly the problem. They're small enough that you never stop to add them up, so you never notice that you're bleeding out in tiny amounts all day every day to people who will forget the interaction within the hour. By the time you get into bed, you've spent your entire day reacting, explaining, performing, proving, and you have nothing left, no energy, no peace, and strangely, no more respect than you had yesterday. You gave pieces of yourself away all day long, and nobody even noticed you were giving. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who ruled the most powerful empire on earth and still found time to write himself notes at night just to stay sane, had a simple, brutal idea about this. He said in his own private journal, never meant for anyone else to read, that you always have the power to have no opinion about a thing and therefore not be disturbed by it, that most of our pain doesn't come from what happens to us. It comes from the story we insist on telling about it out loud to everyone who will listen. He wasn't talking to an audience. He was talking to himself, because even an emperor needed the reminder that the constant urge to react, explain and defend is not strength, it's a leak. And every day you don't plug it, you bleed out a little more of the one resource you can never get back. Here is the core idea, and it's simpler than you expect. The less you explain, defend and perform for other people, the more power you actually have. Call it a law if you want. Silence is not the absence of strength. Silence is strength that hasn't been spent yet. And once you understand that, you start to see your own days completely differently, not as a series of moments to react to, but as a series of moments to choose from. Think about the people you actually respect in your own life, not the ones who are the loudest in a room, not the ones who have a comeback loaded before you've even finished your sentence, but the ones who listen fully, pause before answering, and say maybe a third of what everyone else says in the same conversation. You trust them more, don't you? Not because they're passive, but because when they do speak, it clearly cost them something to decide it was worth saying. That's not a coincidence, and it's not charisma you either have or don't. It's a pattern you can build deliberately, the same way you'd build any other habit, one small rep at a time, in ordinary moments nobody else will ever notice you practicing in. Let's be clear about what this does not mean, because this is where most people get it wrong and end up doing damage to their own lives instead of improving them, mistaking a philosophy of restraint for a license to shut everyone out. This is not about becoming cold, withdrawn, or emotionally unavailable. It's not about refusing to speak up when something actually matters, and it's definitely not about using silence as a passive-aggressive weapon to punish people you're mad at. That's not Stoic discipline, that's just sulking with better branding. Real strategic silence is chosen, not forced. It's available, not absent. You can still be warm, still be present, still say I love you and good morning and I'm proud of you. What you stop doing is narrating your every reaction, defending your every decision, and performing your worst for an audience that was never really watching that closely in the first place. And this is exactly what modern life trains you to do less of, not more. We live in a culture that rewards the opposite of restraint. Post it, explain it, justify it, clap back, prove them wrong in the comments. Every app on your phone is quietly built to reward you for reacting fast and loud, because a fast, loud reaction is engagement, and engagement is the product. Staying quiet, staying composed, thinking before you speak, none of that trends. None of that gets you validated in real time. So you've been trained, one notification at a time, to believe that silence is weakness, that not responding means you lost, that the person who explains themselves the loudest and the fastest is the one who wins the argument, and that training doesn't stay confined to your phone. It bleeds into how you handle the difficult coworker, the passive-aggressive relative, the friend who picks fights over text, until reacting fast has quietly become your default setting in every part of your life, not just the parts with a screen attached. Marcus Aurelius would have found this exhausting. He'd have called it what it is, giving your peace away to people who didn't even ask for it. So let's break this down into 8 specific principles, 8 ways this quiet, deliberate strength shows up in real life. Each one a little sharper and a little harder to swallow than the last. Principle 1 is the simplest and probably the one you've heard some version of before. Speak less, observe more. In any room, a meeting, a family dinner, a group chat that's somehow turned into an argument, there is always someone who feels the need to fill every silence with their own voice. Picture a work call where someone asks a tough question and there's a pause, just 2 or 3 seconds of quiet while people think. Watch how many people can't stand it. Someone jumps in with half an answer just to kill the silence, because silence in a room feels, to most people, like a test they're failing. Or picture the family dinner version of this same reflex. Someone asks a question that's genuinely worth sitting with, and within 2 seconds, 3 different people are already talking over each other, each one afraid that if they don't answer first, they'll seem slow or worse, forgettable. Nobody in that moment is actually thinking. They're all just competing to be the first sound in the room, mistaking speed for insight. Epictetus, who started life as a slave and ended it as one of the most respected teachers in Rome, used to tell his students that nature gave them 2 ears and 1 mouth so that they could listen twice as much as they speak. He wasn't being cute, he meant it as a survival strategy. The psychological term for what's happening in that nervous 3-second pause is the spotlight effect, the deeply wired belief that everyone is watching you, judging you, waiting on you, when in reality almost nobody is paying nearly as much attention to you as you think. Once you understand that the room is not actually staring at you, waiting to catch you in silence, the pressure to fill that silence evaporates. There's nothing shameful about a pause. A pause is not you failing the room, it's you actually thinking, which is rarer and more respected than people assume. Watch closely in your next few meetings and you'll start to see a pattern you never noticed before. The person who waits, then speaks once, clearly, almost always gets more weight given to their words than the 3 people who spoke first, fast and forgettably. Nobody remembers the 6th person to say, yeah, I agree and also. Everyone remembers the one voice that arrived last and landed hardest. Starting today, in your next conversation, practice letting one silence sit for 3 full seconds before you speak. Just 3. Notice how uncomfortable it feels, and notice that nothing bad happens. Notice too who tends to fill that silence for you when you don't rush to fill it yourself, because often the person who can't tolerate quiet ends up revealing more of their own position than you ever would have shared of yours. Silence, used this way, isn't just restraint. It's information gathering. While everyone else is busy performing their certainty out loud, you're the only one in the room actually collecting data. Principle 2 is a little harder. Stop explaining yourself to people who didn't ask, and especially to people who wouldn't understand even if you did. Think about the last time you made a decision, quit a habit, changed your schedule, turned down an invitation, and immediately felt the need to over-explain it to someone. I'm not doing dry January to be dramatic. I just felt like my body needed a break, and also, you keep going, adding reasons, like you're building a legal case for the right to live your own life. Or picture the version at work. You leave 20 minutes early for a doctor's appointment, and you find yourself explaining the appointment in detail to a coworker who never even asked where you were going, just because the silence of simply leaving without comment felt somehow like it needed filling. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius that most people don't actually want your reasons, they want to see whether you'll fold under a little bit of pressure. And the moment you start over-explaining, you've shown them you will. This connects directly to something called cognitive dissonance, the discomfort we feel when our actions don't match what we believe about ourselves, and the desperate mental scramble to resolve that discomfort by talking our way back into feeling consistent. When you over-explain a simple decision, you're not actually informing the other person. You're managing your own internal discomfort out loud, using them as the audience. Here's the pattern interrupt, because I want you to actually sit with this one for a second. How many decisions have you made this year that you immediately, almost reflexively justified to somebody before you even asked yourself if their opinion mattered at all? The reframe is this. Needing to explain yourself to everyone isn't politeness. It's often just anxiety wearing a polite mask. Today, the next time you make a small decision, try saying only "I've decided" and stopping there. Let the silence after it do the work. You'll feel the pull to add "because" and a paragraph of justification right behind it. That pull is normal and it fades faster than you'd expect once you stop feeding it. Most people are so unused to hearing a decision stated without a defense attached that they simply accept it, because a decision delivered without apology doesn't invite negotiation the way a decision delivered with 3 nervous reasons always does. Principle 3 moves from words to something quieter and more dangerous. Master your reaction before you master your day. You know this one intimately. Someone sends a message that lands wrong, a slightly cold reply. A joke that cuts a little too close. A comment your sibling makes at dinner that reopens an old wound, and your whole nervous system flips before your brain even catches up. Your jaw tightens. Your reply is halfway typed before you've thought about a single word of it. Marcus Aurelius kept coming back to this exact moment in his writing, the tiny gap between something happening and you reacting to it, and he said the entire discipline of a good life lives inside that gap. Widen it, and you own your life. Let it collapse to 0, and other people own it for you. Picture the version of this that happens in traffic, because it's almost universal. Someone cuts you off without signaling, and for a full 10 seconds afterward your hands are gripping the wheel a little tighter, your jaw is set, and you're narrating an entire imaginary argument with a stranger you'll never see again. That gap collapsed to 0 the second the car swerved in front of you, and a total stranger got to decide the emotional temperature of your next 20 minutes, free of charge. Psychologists sometimes call the depleted, reactive state you fall into after a long day of holding yourself together ego depletion, the idea that self-control draws from a limited pool of energy that gets used up as the day goes on, which is exactly why you're calm with a rude stranger at 9 a.m. and snap at someone you love at 9 p.m. over something trivial. That's not a character flaw. That's a battery running low. The reframe is that losing your temper doesn't mean you're a bad or weak person. It usually means you're an exhausted one. And exhaustion has patterns you can plan around. Starting today, before you respond to anything that stings, a text, a comment, a look across the dinner table, take 1 slow breath and count to 5 in your head before your mouth or your thumbs move. 5 seconds. That's the entire gap Marcus Aurelius was talking about. It sounds almost too small to matter. And that's exactly why it works. You're not trying to become a different person with a different temperament. You're just inserting 1 honest pause into a system that used to run on autopilot. Do this consistently. And something strange happens over a few weeks. The sting doesn't disappear, but the reflex to broadcast the sting does. You start noticing your own anger arriving like weather, visible, temporary, not something you have to obey the moment it shows up. Now here's the counterintuitive part, and it's the swerve I want you to really sit with before we go further. You might assume that the goal of all this is to eventually stop caring what other people think of you, completely total detachment, total indifference, some kind of untouchable stone-cold monk energy. It's not. That's not where this is going. And if that's what you thought you signed up for, you're about to be surprised by where it actually leads. If you've made it this far, you already think differently than 90% of people watching videos like this. Most of them clicked away 3 principles ago looking for a quick trick, and you stayed for the actual pattern. Do me one favor before we go further. Hit like on this video right now. Not because I'm asking nicely, but because it's the fastest way to make sure this actually reaches someone in your life who reacts before they think you know exactly who I mean, the one who's already popping into your head right now. Uninvited. The second I said it. And remember that open loop from the very beginning, the promise that most people who try to be quiet and powerful get it backwards. We're about to get there. Because principle 4 is exactly where that mistake starts. Principle 4. Let people underestimate you and resist every urge to correct them. This one stings because it goes against something you've been taught your whole life, that you need to make sure people know your word, your resume, your effort, or they'll walk all over you. Picture a coworker who assumes you're not technical enough to handle a certain project, and every cell in your body wants to jump in and list your credentials on the spot. Or the family version, a relative at a holiday dinner makes an offhand comment implying you're not doing as well as your sibling, and you feel the sudden urge to casually mention your recent raise, your recent trip, anything that quietly corrects the record, as if your word needed a footnote to survive one careless sentence over mashed potatoes. Most people do exactly that, and it almost always backfires, because explaining your own value sounds, to the listener, exactly like insecurity, even when it's true. Epictetus taught that other people's opinions of you are entirely outside your control, in the category of things that are simply not yours to manage, and that spending your energy trying to manage them is like trying to control the weather with your mood. There's a well-documented psychological pattern here called social comparison theory. We constantly, often unconsciously, rank ourselves against the people around us, and when someone underestimates us, it triggers a scramble to re-establish our rank in their eyes immediately. Resisting that scramble is uncomfortable in a very specific, almost physical way. But here's the reframe. Being underestimated isn't a threat to correct, it's cover. It's room to work, to build, to move, without an audience narrating your every step and waiting for you to fail publicly. Today, the next time someone assumes less of you than is true, let it stand. Don't correct it. Just do the work, and let the results speak later, on their own schedule, not yours. This is uncomfortable, in a way most self-help advice conveniently skips over. You will feel invisible for a while, maybe even a little humiliated. And there is no shortcut through that feeling, only through it. But notice what you're actually protecting when you resist the urge to correct someone's low opinion of you. Not your ego, but your energy, which you'll need later in the room where it actually counts. Principle 5 raises the stakes again. Guard your energy like it's currency, because it is, and you've been spending it recklessly on people who overdraw the account. Think about the one person in your life you already know who it is who can drain you in a 15-minute phone call. Not because they're cruel necessarily, but because every conversation with them becomes a performance where you have to manage their mood, defend your choices, and walk away feeling like you just ran a race you didn't sign up for. You hang up, and there's a specific kind of tiredness that has nothing to do with what you actually talked about. The topic could have been the weather, and everything to do with how much of yourself you had to hold in position for 15 straight minutes just to keep the peace. Seneca had strong opinions about this. He wrote that nothing is truly ours except time. And yet we guard our money, our property, even our reputation far more carefully than we guard the hours of our own lives, hours we hand out to people and situations without a second thought, as if we'll get more tomorrow. There's a concept in relationship psychology called attachment-driven reactivity. The way certain relationships, especially ones tied to early attachment wounds, can hijack our nervous system faster and harder than a conversation with a total stranger ever could, because some part of us is still trying to win an old, unwinnable argument from years ago. That's why a stranger's rudeness rolls off you in a way your own parents' offhand comment never quite does. The stranger has no history with you, and the parent has decades of it, wired into responses you didn't consciously choose and can't simply reason your way out of in the middle of a phone call. That's the reframe. It's not that you're too sensitive around that one person. It's that your nervous system is running an old program, and old programs run hot. Starting today, pick one recurring interaction in your life that reliably drains you, and set a real boundary around it, a time limit on the call, a topic you simply don't discuss anymore, A firm and calm, I'm not going to get into that. You don't need a speech to do this. You don't need to win the argument about whether the boundary is fair. You just need to hold it the same way you'd hold a locked door calmly, without explaining the lock to everyone who rattles the handle. Principle 6 is where this starts to feel less like advice and more like a complete rewiring of how you measure your own life. Detach your identity from your outcomes. This is a hard one, so stay with it. You didn't get the promotion, the relationship ended, the business didn't work, and somewhere in the wreckage, a voice in your head doesn't just say, that didn't work, it says, I am a failure. As if the outcome and your worth as a human being are the exact same thing, filed under the exact same name. You replay the interview, the pitch, the conversation, searching for the exact sentence where you supposedly ruined everything. As if enough replaying might somehow rewrite the outcome instead of just wearing a groove of shame a little deeper into your memory of it. Marcus Aurelius separated these two things with almost surgical precision. He wrote that you can control your effort, your judgment, your character, and that is entirely, completely yours, but the result, the outside world's response to that effort, was never yours to begin with. So it makes no sense to build your identity on top of something you never owned in the first place. This is closely related to something psychologists call self-verification theory, which describes our deep, often unconscious drive to seek out evidence that confirms what we already believe about ourselves, which means if you already believe deep down that you're not good enough, a single bad outcome will feel like undeniable proof, even if 99 other pieces of evidence say otherwise. The reframe here is precise. An outcome is information, not identity. It tells you something about the situation, it tells you almost nothing about your worth. Today, take one recent failure you've been carrying around like a verdict and rewrite it in one sentence as information instead of identity, not I'm bad at this, but that specific approach in that specific situation didn't work. Say it out loud if you have to, even if it feels clinical, even if part of you resists how unglamorous it sounds. The point isn't to make the disappointment disappear. The point is to stop letting a single outcome hold a permanent vote over who you're allowed to believe you are. Principle 7 is quieter still, and it's the one almost nobody talks about because it doesn't photograph well. Do the work no one is going to see and stop needing anyone to see it. Think about the version of effort that only exists because someone might notice the workout you post before you've even showered, the extra hour at work you make sure your manager knows about, the kindness you do loudly enough that someone can witness it. None of that is evil. But notice how different it feels from the version of effort you do at 6 a.m. alone, when literally nobody on earth knows you did it. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself in private that he should do what needs to be done, without needing witnesses, without needing applause, the way the sun simply keeps rising whether anyone thanks it or not. He wasn't writing that line for a crowd of soldiers or senators, he was writing it in a tent, on campaign, exhausted, to an audience of exactly one person, himself, on a morning when he clearly didn't feel like getting up and doing the work either. There's a well-known concept called the audience effect, which shows that our behavior, our effort, our honesty, even our generosity shifts measurably depending on whether we believe we're being observed, which means a huge amount of what we call character is really just performance calibrated to whoever's watching. The reframe is almost uncomfortable in how simple it is. The version of you that shows up when no one is watching is the only version that's actually real. Everything else is a slightly adjusted broadcast, edited in real time for an audience that will forget it within a day, while the private version compounds quietly into the person you actually become. Starting today, do one thing, one small, disciplined thing, and tell absolutely nobody you did it. Not even in a caption, just you and the thing. It will feel utterly anticlimactic the first time, like a joke with no punchline, because you've spent years associating effort with the payoff of being seen doing it. Push through that flatness anyway. That flatness is just withdrawal from an audience you didn't actually need in the first place. And that brings us to principle 8, the sharpest one, the one that ties everything else together, because here is the paradox that's been building underneath every principle so far. The thing I promised you at the very beginning would backfire for most people who tried this the obvious way. Most people who chase this kind of quiet strength think the end goal is to stop needing other people's approval entirely, to become so detached, so self-contained that nothing anyone says or thinks about you can touch you anymore. And when they chase that directly, they usually end up cold, isolated, and strangely more anxious than before, because true indifference to other people's opinions can't be forced from the outside in. It has to be earned from the inside out, one act of restraint at a time. Here's the twist. The goal was never to stop caring what people think. The goal was to stop needing them to think it right now, out loud on your schedule, before you can feel okay about yourself. Marcus Aurelius didn't become the most respected man in Rome by trying to be respected. He became respected precisely because he stopped performing for respect and simply kept doing the work in private, and the respect arrived anyway as a side effect, not as the goal. That's the paradox. The moment you stop chasing quiet power as an image to project and start actually living it as a private discipline is the exact moment it becomes real, undeniable, and impossible to fake. You cannot perform your way into genuine strength. You can only build your way into it silently and let the world notice on its own time. This is exactly why the obvious version of this advice backfires for so many people. They hear stop caring what people think and they treat it like a switch. They go quiet, pull back from friends, stop asking for feedback, stop letting anyone in, and call it discipline. But that's not strength, that's just isolation wearing a stoic costume, and it usually collapses within a few months because a human being cannot manufacture indifference through sheer willpower alone. Real indifference, the Marcus Aurelius kind, isn't built by refusing to care. It's built as a byproduct, quietly, session by session, every time you choose not to explain, not to perform, not to correct, not to leak your energy into a fight that costs more than it's worth. You don't wake up one day and decide to stop needing approval. You simply notice months later, looking back, that you haven't needed it in a while and you can't even remember exactly when that changed. So picture who you actually become on the other side of this. You walk into a room and you're not scanning it for approval anymore, you're just present in it. Someone says something sharp, something meant to get a reaction out of you, and you feel the old pull to defend yourself rise up for half a second, and then it passes like a wave that used to knock you over and now just moves past your ankles. You notice them watching your face afterward, almost confused, waiting for the reaction they were fishing for. And it simply doesn't come, not because you're suppressing it, but because it genuinely isn't there to suppress anymore. You make a decision, a real one, about your money, your relationships, your time, and you don't feel the old compulsion to build a public case for it. You just decide and you live inside that decision. People underestimate you sometimes, and instead of that being a wound, it's just information you quietly file away, room to move without an audience. Your energy, at the end of the day, is still yours, not spent defending, explaining, performing, proving. You still love people, you still show up. You still laugh loudly and cry when it's real. This isn't about becoming numb or distant. The world doesn't get quieter, the meetings don't get less chaotic, your phone doesn't stop buzzing, your family doesn't stop being your family. What changes is you. The chaos is still there. You're just not leaking energy into all of it anymore. And the strange thing people notice about you, the thing they can't quite name, is that you seem to have more time, more calm, more weight in a room without having said a single word more than before. You notice it too, in small, almost embarrassingly ordinary moments. You get cut off in traffic and your morning isn't ruined by it. Someone at work takes credit for something you did and you feel the old flash of injustice arrive and pass within a minute instead of camping out in your chest for the rest of the day. You stop rehearsing arguments in the shower. You stop composing the perfect comeback 3 hours after the conversation that provoked it has already ended. None of this makes you passive. If anything, you become more decisive, because decisions that used to cost you a day of anxious second guessing now cost you almost nothing at all. You've already spent that energy on the thing itself instead of on the performance around it. Here's your challenge, and I want you to actually do this, not just nod along and close the tab. For the next 7 days, pick one principle from this video, just one, and apply it every single day without telling a single person you're doing it. Let a silence sit for 3 seconds before you fill it. Stop explaining a decision you don't owe anyone an explanation for. Do one piece of work that nobody sees and let it stay that way. 7 days, one principle, no audience. Don't pick all 8. That's the trap. You watch a video like this, you feel fired up and you try to overhaul your entire personality by Thursday, and by Friday you've abandoned all of it because it was never sustainable in the first place. One principle, 7 days. Small enough that you'll actually do it, specific enough that you'll actually notice the difference. Write it down somewhere if you have to, not to show anyone, just so future you, 3 days in when it feels pointless, has a reminder of what you committed to before the noise of your normal life talked you out of it. You'll be tempted on day 3 or 4 to quietly slip back into the old pattern, because the old pattern is comfortable in the exact way a bad habit is always comfortable, familiar, well-worn, requiring no new effort. Notice that pull when it comes, and choose the harder, quieter option one more time anyway. Because here is the line I want you to remember long after this video ends. The loudest people in the room are fighting for attention, but the quietest ones are already holding the power, they just stopped announcing it. If this landed for you, if even one of these 8 hit a little too close to home, comment the word quiet below right now so I know exactly which principle to go deeper on next. And if you want more of this Stoic thinking, translated into a language you can actually use on a Tuesday morning when your phone won't stop buzzing, subscribe, because this channel exists for exactly that. Thank you for staying to the end. Win quietly.